he does. First record I want to talk about is Benson Boone's There She Goes. The whole world now knows that Benson Boone is obviously a fucking crazy
Force of
talent.
nature.
Yeah, yeah. I have a cut with him. I had the opportunity to work with him super early on. I was literally one of that kid's first sessions. I think I was his second or third session, and you're just like, I don't understand how you're this good.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Already, like such a talent. But what's the story behind that song and that right?
I don't remember the session just came up as any other normal session. I know Jeff Sosnow signed him at Warner.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about that he was on American Idol briefly or anything like that. So we just listened to some of the music ahead of time. We're like, oh, this guy's voice is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
it should be a good session. He has his best friend is this collaborator that he pretty much does every session with him, Jack LaFrance, who's amazing. And yeah, they came over. I think we were doing sessions out of my parents' house temporarily because the studio was under construction. But they just came over and we just started messing around and we were just like kind of jamming a little bit in the room.
Benson just came in. Benson came in and pretty much immediately sat down at the piano and was just like noodling around, and like, he's the kind of guy who sits down at a piano and like, you're like, oh wait, everything is good. Okay, got it. So now our job is like to hone in on the best of the good kind of thing. Yeah. And I think, he started, we all started kind of messing around, like Brian said, jamming, and it was kind of turning into a bit of a like classic Benson Boone ballad sort of feeling. And Ryan was on the drums, and I think Jack, who writes a lot with Benson, and knows kind of his tendencies inside and out, made a very wise decision to be like, what if we just totally switched up the style in the chorus and sort of do a full tempo change and a full groove change and a full everything. And like, it's so fun for us to be able to experiment with like, sort of like, just like free for all sort of thing. And because Benson is sort of like his voice and his, like the style of music kind of lends itself to being like sort of like a classic, like 70s epic song. We just kind of like all went for it. And the second kind of Ryan just, started doing the groove of the chorus and we changed it up, we were like, ooh, this is cool. Okay. Now it went from being a ballad to like, this could be anything. It could go on a real journey of a song.
Yeah. It almost seems like you guys were like, almost like acting as a faux band in there with Ryan being on the drums and like, like being able to feel it out. Cause like it's hard to do tempo change moves like that when you're at a computer.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
And Benson on the piano, and what was it? Jack had some reference, like, what if we change this up to like Passion Pit Take a Walk vibe?
Oh, that makes sense.
That's where it initially came from, but then it turned into like, this is a full ELO Mr. Blue Sky exactly reference, and it just became this whole other thing. So a lot of very random elements went into what it ended up becoming, and
it ended up being like four studio sessions of different writing and producing to bring it together. There was a lot of different changes involved. Yeah, it was not a linear writing process.
We finished that day, and then we did another day at what's the studio, Ben? Gold Diggers. Yeah, for drums. They have an amazing drum room in room 1 over there. So we did the drums and some more instruments there, some guitars, and then I think there was a couple of lyric rewrite sessions, and then that was the final thing after, over a period of him making that album.
And then we added the bridge. Then we added the double time Mr. Blue Sky style bridge.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
That wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a very classic like Benson story where I appreciate him and his team. His A&R at Warner, one of my favorite people, John Chen. He used to be my A&R when I was signed to Primary Wave and BMG, so I've known him for a while, but they always just give really good notes. Like, I usually hate getting notes from teams, and whenever Benson's team gives notes, and Benson's notes also are just like, damn, you're totally right. Like, we should do that, or we should make this like very small lyric change. They made one from the record that I did with Benson. It used to be called Let Her Go, and then John was like, it should be Let Me Go. And we were like, oh, fuck, you're right. Like, it totally should. I just like changed the song. It's like so funny how like those small little changes are so important sometimes.
Yeah. You have to be open to those opinions for sure.
Yes. Oh yeah, of course. It's like,
and pretend you're not deeply offended.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's certain people, like certain A&Rs who I really, really trust, where I'm like, okay, like you've proven yourself to me that like, at least like we're on the same wavelength in terms of taste. Sometimes when you're dealing with an A&R, it's like your tastes are just so different. that I feel like that's where the kind of mesh happens sometimes, where like people don't like notes, where it's like I think you guys just have different visions. It's not that, they're bad
Right.
ideas. I mean, sometimes they're bad ideas, but
well, I think that sometimes the ideas stem from fear and on the business side of things, which is totally understandable. And like, I get it. Like their jobs are literally on the line if they're going to put themselves out there for a song.
Yeah.
And so I think when you can kind of sense when the notes are like based off of like, oh, I don't know if this is a hit or if it's not a hit. So I'm like going to throw a bunch of ideas because I'm not sure. And those I think are tough to kind of work around. But then sometimes people are just like, oh, I love this song. Like, what if we just did that, And
that's small little things.
I mean, the number of times we've been on version 19 and then the final that came out was like version 2.1.
Oh yeah, of course. Every time. That's how it goes. Just gotta go, you gotta no stone left. Oh boy, no stone left unturned kind of vibe. You guys actually answered a couple of the questions that I already had when you were talking about the song, but the piano in that song, was that like that original piano that you were saying Benson was playing in your studio at first?
No, we re-recorded it at Gold Diggers.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's a real piano.
It might have been a little bit of a blend actually in the end. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either, but it's all real piano.
Yeah, that was my. I mean, it sounded real, but like there's some. I mean, the pianos, the VSTs are getting.
They're getting good, but yes, it's real. And Benson's such a good piano player for somebody who like claims that he doesn't know what he's doing. He's infuriating.
Yeah, kids all like I've been playing since I was 5, and he just goes on there. It's like, man, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, and then he'll just like do a backflip into the bathroom, and you're like, oh, you're infuriating.
That's what I love about Benson is that like everyone's like, they see his TikTok persona and they're like, oh, it's just an act. I'm like, no, that is him.
Yeah.
Literally, first time I met that kid before he was doing flips on TikTok, he did a flip. And it's just like, okay, this is just who you are. Cool.
And then he takes his shirt off and you're like, whoa, dude. And he's like, never worked out a day in my life.
Yeah. Yep.
But also just want to say that after working with him a bunch of times, I also think that he's like incredibly introspective and has this like emotional side of himself where like we've had some good conversations in the studio where I've been like, I think you really have what it like in my mind. I'm thinking like this is a real star because like not only is he such a performer, but he's also such a thinker and an introvert too. That's when I was like, oh yeah, I'm a total believer of this guy.
There's only 2 people I've met in my life before they became famous where I was like, you meet and you interact with them and you're like, oh, this person's a huge star. And it was Billie Eilish before she blew up, and it was Benson. Like those are the only 2 people that I've met and worked with early where I was like, you guys, there's something here and I don't know what, but
for me, it was Halsey. The second she walked in the room, we did a song on her first album, and she came in, and I was immediately like, "Oh, this is a star."
Yeah, it's crazy how you can just like get that sometimes from people, and it's so rare. The other question I had about you guys mentioned you did the drums at Gold Diggers there. Was there anything cool or specific that you remember doing in the engineering and recording process, or even in once it was in the box, things that you did to make it sound the way it did?
I mean, the drum sound is like the in-house engineer there, Ed, and his assistant Brad are just like such good dudes and so good at what they do, and they have that room dialed in, and which is why we always try to go back there if we have to do something. And we were doing a lot of outside studio sessions in different places at the time because we didn't have this studio that we have now. Right. But you try things different places. They just like had it dialed in. It's also one of my favorite studios because it's one of those studios that doesn't just come with a piano and nothing else. Right. They have the owner is a drummer, so he has like 12 kits, stacked up on the wall, and every amp you could ever want to try out, and they don't charge you for any of it. And it's kind of like, honestly, one place we used to do this a lot was before we would go to Gold Diggers was NRG in the Valley. Have you been there?
Yeah.
It was the same kind of thing. And like, it wasn't like a sexy studio like Sunset Sound or something, or at least perspective wise, because it was known as like the new metal studio of, the early 2000s, but same kind of deal. They just had so much gear to pick from, and you never had to rent anything in, and it was just there for you. So I don't remember the exact process of the drums at Gold Diggers for this Benson thing, but we had kind of done a few sessions there, and Ed, the engineer, had it so dialed in that I would like have him do his setup, and then we just like make little tweaks on the board on EQ. Like we have a few little things we do across the board every time we record drums. That's just a thing that we like.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to get specific about it.
Oh, no, the listeners are going to want to hear it, so definitely say it.
Oh, okay. Like little things. I don't even remember where we picked this up, but I just love the sound of a kit where the snare is in every mic and you just can't get rid of it. It's just everywhere. So we'll throw the bottom snare through a distressor and nuke it and just have it completely all the way up, the highest ratio, and just compressing and gaining as much as humanly possible. And then it just exists across every mic and every part of the mix. And it's just really fun to kind of play with that. And it kind of gives me like Genghis or like Mike Snow, the drums, the sounds that those guys get. I know they do a combination of live and sampled stuff, but it just kind of gives that vibe, and that's something we always do. And then
because that's funny you bring that up, because it's like, I was curious because the snare is so consistent. That's why I was like, man, I'm pretty sure these are real drums, but I'm not 1,000% sure, because they sound great.
Yeah, and then I mean, another thing, it's not really like some big secret. A lot of people do it, but we'll just when a studio has like a stereo SSL, we'll just run the rooms through that and do an external sidechain for like in real time through the kick. So that's just printed as, we don't like do it like a Howard Benson, pop punk record from the 2010s, but just a subtle amount of compression every time, just for the cymbals in the room to kind of like duck when the kick hits.
When the kick is hitting. Yeah, I mean, the drums on there really, like, they stand out. And the one thing that has to do with the drums is, the kind of like the passion pit kind of vibe to get those stabs. How deep did you guys feel like you had to get in editing to make them really feel like they're super tight, or are you guys just that good of players where you didn't even have to?
I mean, Ryan played those drums. Let's give Ryan the credit for those.
No, but not even the drums, but like the drums, the bass, the piano, everything hitting. It's just like, it's so perfect. It's really nicely done.
I think we're nudging things here and there, and quantizing drums here and there. If I'm like, oh, but this feels so good, but it's the whole thing's a little late. Let me just like, it just depends on the sound of it. Sometimes you just get like a great consistency of hits in a particular fill, but you kind of rushed it, and you don't want to lose that consistency in that take. And we did that, and we just made did it to a tempo map that felt right with the piano. Like what we'll do is trial and error. We'll like use like the demo or like a temporary version of the piano and the drums in soft synths, and not in the case of this, Benz's piano was live, but we had we trial and error like what was the right tempo speed up that felt right, and then go back and use that tempo map to then do the real thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. My last question on this song is, from my own experience, recording Benson's vocals is probably one of the easiest jobs in the world. But do you guys remember kind of what you did, either or both, in and out of the box there to get it to sit as well as it did in the mix?
It was definitely the 251 at Gold Diggers had a big part, and just that's just always the best sounding to me, because it's not overly bright, but it has like no harshness for most voices. I've done shootouts before, and it depends on the vocalist where the SM7 beat the 251 somehow, but
sometimes it does.
He sounded amazing on that, and just like realizing that his range and his dynamics and his volume can be so insane. Just to there was definitely like some distortion on the first few takes where we're like, oh, we have to put the trim on the 1073 all the way down. Got it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And then then we just run it. I believe we just run that through the 1176 and then again through the LA2A, and at each stage just a little amount of compression.
Yeah.
And then
you guys, when you say that you have a real one in the studio there that you're running?
Yeah, at Gold. Yeah, we have that here in our studio, but also at Gold Digger. So that's like part of our main chain. And then depending on the type of song and what's going on around it, like we might throw another CL1B UAD on top of it to if it's like super dynamic and needs to be flattened a little bit.
For our listeners and for myself, when you're running it through the 76 and the LA2A, how much gain reduction do you like to see on each one usually?
I mean, it'll be more on the 76. It'll probably be down to between 5 and 7 at the most, if possible. But it obviously depends on what the vocal content is. And then the LA2A is much tamer. It's like maybe like 2 across the board.
Yeah.
I'm like looking to check the values. I'm like,
what is it again?
What's funny is now those obviously changed based on the singer, but there was a long period of time where when early on in our career, we worked at a studio, and the engineer who was in there was like, Max Martin was in here yesterday doing vocals, and we haven't touched the 1176, like the chain. So we took a picture of that and we were like, this is Max Martin settings. Yeah. And we just use that as our default for years and years and years, being like, if he does it, that's it. That's
so funny.
Now I think it's a little bit more customized to the singer, but it used to be just that.
I know. I do try. I have an 1176 and an LA2A. I do have the Audioscape versions, which I think are fucking amazing, by the way. They are the best of the clones. But yeah, it's like I try and do like a set it and forget it kind of a thing, just for like in case of a recut or whatever, where it's like, all right, let's just like kind of I try not to touch by attack and release and stuff, and then just like only move the input and output.
That becomes harder when your kid turns 3 and comes in the studio and just like touches every knob.
My studio's in a separate garage. I haven't had that problem yet, but I'm sure it's going to happen soon enough. Yeah. But at least on an 1176, there's not too many knobs. You know, you're like,
no, you know what it's supposed to be. It's the 10-channel drum sidecar that really messes with my shit up.
Oh, that's hilarious. All right, I want to move on to our next song here.